Good to be together today. Good to have everybody here. If you're a visitor, we are glad you're with us. We'll allow you to scoot in a little closer and get a little warmer if you need to. Today is not your typical Christmas message, but this year, fortunately for us, Christmas is on Sunday, so I look forward to a good Christmas message next week. This morning we're going to talk about the real devil. I don't know what image you have in your mind of the devil. If you Googled the devil and looked up images of him, there's all kinds of scary images. I actually thought about putting some of them up on the PowerPoint, but I'm sure some of you would be really upset if you saw some of the pictures because they're really scary. And we think of the devil in that light. But oftentimes the devil comes to us in different ways. But I want us to think about what the devil is like and his qualities and how he carries himself and what he does and his approach to us. And then consider the devil for what he is, and then consider the opposite of that, which is our God, our Father, the Son, and the Spirit, and how completely different our God is to the devil. From what we understand about the devil in a description of his names, he is our adversary and he is our accuser. By his actions, he is a destroyer. And there's nothing that is good about him. We need to keep what we say about him in the context of what God has revealed about him. In fact, the writer Jude, you'll remember, speaks about the archangel Michael in his dispute with the devil about the body of Moses didn't even bring slanderous accusations against the devil. He didn't try to make things up. He didn't try to put the devil down in ways that he could not do it. There is a respect we must have for our adversary. There is a respect we must have for the devil. Now, from our passage out of 1 Peter chapter 5, we have an interesting description of the devil and what he does, how he operates. If we look at that passage, you'll notice it says that we need to be self-controlled and alert. In other words, we need to be sober-minded. We need to be awake. We need to be paying attention to what's taking place, to what's happening. We need to be able to see what sometimes is very difficult to see. And you can imagine a lion in the wild, how difficult it is to see, and what it is we need to look for. But notice it says, your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Now, if we think about that statement, if you know anything about lions, they don't roar right before they attack. They don't wander around the wilderness looking for prey by roaring. It's an interesting way Peter reveals here the modus operandi of the devil, what he likes to do. A lion, when it's in the wild, when it roars, it's telling you, this is my territory. You're entering my domain. I am the king. You are the prey. When we go out into the world, we've got to realize who the predator is. You see, sometimes we think it's our neighbor. Sometimes we think it's our coworker. Sometimes we think it's our enemies in our neighborhoods or on the streets. But it's actually Satan. And if you listen very carefully, you can hear his roar. He's marked his territory. This is his world. It's interesting that God created it, but yet Satan come and he's spoiled it for us. That's just what Satan does. That's how he operates. I saw an interesting interview with a wealthy individual that had wanted to go on a camera safari to Africa for a very long time. And he saved up money and he got his whole family to go, and they were really excited. And of course they didn't do the hunting thing, so they thought they would hunt the animals with cameras and they would take pictures. And on their journey, several of them were taking pictures of all the animals. Others were taking pictures of those who were in the vehicle as they were driving around. And every time they stopped, they took pictures. And after going several days in Africa, taking all these wonderful pictures, they thought, wouldn't it be great if we put them together in a slideshow? And when we got back, we could show everybody. So they were really excited about it as they were taking all these pictures. Well, when they got home, they spent a few days collecting all the pictures they wanted. They looked over them for the clear ones. Obviously, there were some using a regular camera. There were some that were blurry. There were some where there were pictures of people they didn't want, or animals in positions they didn't want, or where they wanted them on the film. And they got the slideshow just right. And they thought they'd spent a lot of time meticulously looking at each picture. And so on the day that they were going to have the slideshow, they invited their family and friends over, and they had the screen up, and they had the projector going, and they were going through the slides, and everybody was oohing and ahhing as they were seeing all these wonderful pictures of all these animals, and of course this family interacting, with others on the trip, and them pointing out the window and looking at all the animals, and it was really wonderful. And at one point, someone in the crowd said, "What's that in the corner over there?" And of course it was a picture of the party that had stopped on the side of the road, and everybody had got out of the vehicle. There were probably 20 or so people, and they were sort of mingling around, talking. Some were looking off into the distance. But the guide had thought that it was safe enough for them to stop, and he had allowed them to get out of the vehicle because they could see for a long distance. But strangely enough, there in the picture, in the bottom left corner, while everybody was standing out there in the open, was a picture of a lion's head sitting in the grass, looking through the grass at all these people standing on the side of the road. Now, while they were over there, with the help of the guide, and with the company of all those people, they probably felt really safe. But they were not. I think sometimes we go out into the world, and we think because somebody's told us we're okay, we're safe, we can go about life as normal. As Christians, we've got to realize we are not safe. If you took a picture of your life and you could see what is going on in your life, and you could perhaps not catch that physical image of the lion, you could catch the spiritual image of Satan. He would be there in every frame. You see, because the lion in his world is marking his territory. He knows who is his. You see, it's you who come into his domain that do not belong there. It's you who come into his domain who are his prey that he is going to devour. You see, when we go out into the world, that's the world. Satan already has those people. He doesn't have to convince them of what kind of lives they need to lead. He's got to try to deceive you of the life that you need to lead. You see, because you are the target. You think you enter out into this world and you like everybody else. But you don't realize Satan knows who you are. Because there's something you have that he sees that even we don't see. You see, we've got a big target painted on us. We don't see ourselves that way. We think we can blend in. We think we can hide. We think when somebody looks over a crowd, they can't pick out who the Christians are. And that may be so, but Satan can. You see, because you have something that Satan recognizes right away. You have the Spirit of God living in you, and you can't hide. You see, to Satan, it is abundantly clear who is his and who is not. I don't want to scare you, but it does say we need to be aware of what Satan is doing. We need to be alert. We need to be sober-minded. We need to be aware of who our enemy is. But I want us to go through this lesson this morning thinking about what Satan is like, what he is really like, and for us not to give him too much power, not to give him more than he demands. Because Satan demands more, and I think as we go through it we'll see. And some of us maybe have played into Satan's demands. But at the same time, I want you to think about the opposite of what we're discussing. So you can start thinking about, in your own mind, how God is in comparison to Satan. So the first thing I want us to consider is that Satan is a created being. Satan is a created being. He's not exactly like you and I, because obviously he has different qualities, different talents, different skills, different abilities. But he's a created being just like you and I. And therefore, along with that come certain shortcomings. Look at what John says. He says, that through him, this is through Jesus, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. Now we may discuss what all things are, but all things excludes nothing, and therefore angels would be included in this discussion. Now you've probably heard people say that, well, that means God created evil. God created Satan, and therefore God created evil. Well, that is not so. God created choice, and he allowed us to choose, and he thought that if a created being would choose either the dark or the light, the wrong or the right, he would make a wise choice. But Satan did not. Look at the passage out of Revelation 12:7-8. It says, "And there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon," that is Satan. "The dragon and his angels fought back, but he was not strong enough, and they lost their battle in heaven." So Satan, a created being, rebelled against God in heaven, and God uses the other angels in heaven to fight this battle. And Satan is defeated, and he's expelled from heaven. So Satan, in comparison to the other angels, could not defeat the angels that were for God. And so we get a little bit of a glimpse into the ability, the power of Satan in comparison to the other created beings. And then notice this passage out of Jude. It says, "And the angels who did not keep their positions of authority, but abandoned their own home, these he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day." So these angels once had positions of authority, but they decided to rebel against God, and therefore they lost their position. And so these created beings had the ability to do certain things. They had certain functions, certain roles to perform, and now they could no longer do them. Well, what can we learn about that? What can we understand about Satan? Knowing that he's a created being, know that he was created for a specific purpose, and knowing that he rebelled against that purpose, and now he's gone on to do something he wants to do. Well, that tells us something very interesting about Satan. You see, Satan, even though he believes, even though he thinks he's able to do things that are maybe more powerful, even though he's able to spoil God's creation, God's plan, even though he thinks he can do those things, he's wrong. He's mistaken. Because he's a created being, and a created being is designed for the function in which it was created to perform. Now, if you ever take something and use it in a way in which it's not supposed to be used, there are problems with that. It does not operate the same way. So Satan will never be complete. Satan will never reach his full potential. Because you see, he's a created being, and a created being must serve the Creator. I used to use an illustration, and I'll use it this time as it kind of explains it. I have friends that kind of complain, because when they come over to my house and they kind of help me doing a project around the house, they'll say, "Regan, you don't have enough tools." And that's true. If you come to my house, I don't have a lot of tools, okay, to do all these little handyman jobs. That's just the way it is. And for a long time, I didn't even have a hammer. Okay, I didn't have a hammer in the house. So you know what I used? I used a crescent wrench for a hammer. So Debbie says to me, "Put this picture up on the wall." So I took the crescent wrench and you turn it sideways. It's got a nice flat surface. It's pretty heavy. And if you hold it right and you control it well, you can hammer a nail in the wall. So I was hammering this nail in the wall, and I think it hit a stud, and I slipped and I hit the little spindle inside and it knocked it out. There goes my crescent wrench. I have a wonderful odd-shaped hammer, but no longer a crescent wrench. You see, if we use that illustration, God created Satan to be an angel of His, an angel of light. God created Satan to be a crescent wrench. Well, crescent wrenches Crescent wrenches don't nail in nails. But Satan decided, no, I want to be a hammer. I want to be a hammer. You see, Satan will never reach his full potential. Maybe this is some of his frustration. The harder he tries to do what he does, actually the less effective he gets. You see, because the more you use that crescent wrench to be a hammer, the less effective it becomes. I can't imagine the frustration that Satan feels because he can't live up to his full potential. Satan will never be at his best. He'll never be at his best. What that tells me is Satan has even limited himself. We're dealing with a created being that is frustrated and is limited by what he can do. Now, if you ever face an enemy like that, there are obviously some problems with it. You know, they always say, watch out if you're out hunting and you wound the animal you're trying to kill, because after a while it may turn around and you may be the prey. So you've got to be careful of Satan. He's not a happy camper. And he's out to get you. But you've got to realize he's not operating to his full potential. He's limited. He's very limited. And we'll see in just a moment why. So Satan is a created being, and therefore he has obvious limitations because he's not living up to his full potential. But what we also know about Satan is that Satan does not possess all power. Because he is a created being, he is nothing like God. He is limited in every way. He is limited by the abilities God initially had given him, and of course, because he has chosen to rebel against God, he is less than that. God being the creator is so much more than Satan will ever be. Some mistakenly say that Satan is the opposite of God. Satan is somehow God's adversary, God's nemesis, God's rival. Those words do not describe the relationship. You see, because Satan does not have any of the power that God has. Look at 1 John 4 and 4. John will say, you, dear children, are from God and have overcome them, because the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world. We need to be certain of the fact that Satan is nowhere near as powerful as God. One of the greatest illustrations of that is Satan actually allows Jesus to go to the cross. Isn't that amazing? Satan thought, I'm going to get Jesus to the cross. I couldn't kill him when he was a baby. I've tried to kill him all this time, but everything's working in my favor, and you know what? I'm going to get that guy on the cross. And God's going, yes. Yes. Because Satan can't even look down the road like God can. Satan can't see the future, and sometimes it's even so obvious. Satan is so blinded by hate that he can't see the good. He can just see the evil that he's doing, and he can't see beyond that. But it shows his limitations. Look at John 10, 28 to 30. Jesus says, I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish. That's us. No one can snatch them out of my hand. My Father has given them to me, is greater than all. No one can snatch them out of my Father's hand. I and the Father are one. That's probably the most comforting passages in the Bible when we speak about Satan and God. Satan cannot dislodge you from your relationship with God. There is no way. If you have chosen God, God will protect you, and there is no power Satan has that he can use to take you away from God. Look at this passage out of Luke. I think this is a humorous one. Luke 22. Jesus says to Simon, 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 Satan has asked to sift you as wheat, but I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. So Satan has to come to Jesus and say, you know what? Can you get me a little closer to Peter? Can you let me get in there a little closer? We're reminded in this story of Job. Do you remember Job? Job has got this perfect life. Job is living the American dream. And beyond that. And it seems like all of a sudden all the wheels fall off. Because Satan is allowed to get a little closer than he normally is. And then Satan goes before God again, you remember, and he wants to get even closer. Hey, if I can somehow physically affect this man, not just affect those around him, not just mentally or emotionally, maybe if I can physically affect him, he will turn from you. And God says, it's not going to happen. Satan is that limited. Satan cannot tell the future. He does not operate under his own power. Satan is severely limited because he is not God. For Satan to defeat God, he would have to possess all of God's power. Even to be able to compete with God, he'd have to be at least equal to God. But we know that he is none of those things. We can tell by Scripture that Satan is very limited in his reach on you. God has protected us to such a point that Satan is very limited on what he can do. I think today that tells us a lot about our spiritual world, because there are some that would have you believe that Satan can somehow at any point just snatch you away from God. I remember that was one of the most troubling questions teenagers would ask me when I was a youth minister. Their biggest fear was that someday they would wake up and they would denounce God. Somehow Satan would go and get inside their mind and convince them that God cannot help them, that they are lost, and that God has a grasp on them. How can you convince someone that Satan cannot do that? That God will not allow them to do that? Satan is not like God. He does not have his strength, he does not have his power, and he certainly does not have his ability. But Satan, because of that, is not self-sustaining. He's not self-sufficient. He can't survive on his own. Just like a fish out of water cannot survive. Just like a human being left in space cannot survive. Satan cannot survive without God. Satan depends on God to survive. Notice 2 Corinthians 11, verse 14 and 15. We're going to look at the first part. And no wonder, he says, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. That's the best Satan can do. Satan was once an angel of light, and now because of the choices he's made, the best he can do is only masquerade as one. I don't know about you, have you ever been around somebody who has tried to dress up and try to be somebody else? Have you ever noticed that? Have you ever noticed people that are, what you see is not really who they are? One day when I was in Bakersfield, I was in the dentist's office, and my daughter was inside. I think she was getting a regular cleaning, and I was sitting in the dentist's office, and this woman walked in. And I noticed her right away. She was well dressed, and she was really tall, and she was very athletic looking. And she caught my eye, so I kind of looked to the left, and I noticed, and I thought, that's a really tall woman. You know, it's not often you see a woman that's 6'2", 6'3", and weighs about 200 pounds. It's not often you see a woman like that. So I noticed her. And she had this long blonde hair, and she had makeup on. She had blue eyes. And she came and sat down about 3 seats away from me. And at one point, I kind of glanced across to the left, and I noticed this huge Adam's apple on her neck. And I said, there's something wrong here. And then I thought, you know what? Maybe I'm just seeing things. Now, of course, I don't want to stare because that's not very polite. So every now and then I was like... And then when she spoke to the receptionist, I realized, see, that's the best Satan can do. The best Satan can do is try to be that angel of light, but he cannot do that. We live in a world in which criminals exist, criminals survive, criminals thrive because of the ordered society we have. See, because they hide among us. They masquerade as law-abiding citizens when they are not. And when you're asleep and you can defend yourself less, they come out to play. So they could hide. Notice this passage out of Matthew 4. Again, this is Jesus' temptation. The devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. All this I will give you, he said, if you will bow down and worship me. I don't know if God was trying to be facetious, if he was showing the humor in this. This is like me going out into the parking lot and finding your car. Your car. And then I get somebody else out there and I say, do you see this nice car? It's my car. I'll sell it to you for $10,000. And you'd be saying, hey buddy, that's not your car. You can't sell my car. And certainly not for $10,000. It's worth a lot more than that. I could imagine God thinking, what is Satan trying to do? He's trying to sell Jesus back what he made? So futile. See, that's the best Satan can do. The best Satan can do is just try to sell back something that's not even his. Notice this passage out of Matthew 12, verse 25 and 26. Jesus knew their thoughts and said to them, every kingdom divided against itself will be ruined, and every city or household divided against itself will not stand. If Satan drives out Satan, he is divided against himself. How then can his kingdom stand? You see, even Satan has to use good things to get his job done. You see, we speak about no honor among thieves. You know, that's a saying we use. But to some degree there is some kind of cooperation, isn't there? When two guys decide to rob a bank, at some point they have to use some good things to achieve their goal. They have to work together. They have to communicate. They have to share afterwards. You see, the truth is evil depends on good. Evil can't survive without good. Satan cannot survive without God. He needs God. You see, the opposite is true of that. Good does not need evil to exist. In fact, good is diminished by evil. Good is lessened by evil. God is hampered by Satan. Satan is not necessary. The truth is, as we look ahead to eternity, we look ahead to a place where things will be perfect. Because all the imperfections will be taken away. And Satan is the epitome of that imperfection. You see, because Satan needs all the good people to be able to do all the evil he does. Satan needs to hide behind God to be able to achieve his goals. You see, because all the rules that God has set up, that we live by, are the ones Satan uses to maneuver through in life. We know for a very fact that even God's patience sustains Satan right now. God could end everything right now. He could say, this very moment, He could send Jesus back to claim His. And Satan will be eternally cast into hell. And it'll all be over for him. But God patiently waits. Because He waits for the good, in spite of Satan and all of the evil. I hope you've been thinking about the opposite of what Satan is like, and try to imagine, even just get an idea of what God is like. And that we are nothing like Satan. And that we don't want to be anything like him, but we want to be like God. We want to be creators. We don't want to be destroyers like Satan. We want to be able to live forever, eternally with God. We don't want to be limited in any way. In fact, we want to remove ourselves from these physical bodies that hold us back. And we want to go to a place where we don't need to sleep or eat or feel pain anymore and suffer. We want to be free. We want to be truly free. And that freedom will come in the presence of our Creator. And He will allow all those things to happen. And those are the things that wait ahead of us. I want you to know this morning that you are safe with Jesus. You are safe with Jesus. Because Satan is a created being and he's limited in many ways. Satan does not have the power sometimes we give him, the control sometimes we give him. And Satan certainly cannot exist without God. He is dependent on God, not God dependent on him. We are blessed to be able to have a relationship with God. We may struggle in life. We may not be able to hide from Satan because he can see who we are. But we are protected. We are kept safe. And we are on a journey to an eternal home where all of these problems that we have in this life will be taken away. I encourage you to think about that as you go through this week. Don't forget that Satan knows who you are and you cannot hide. But at the same time, realize that God is taking care of you. And He's going to get His will done in your life. We have a song that's prepared at this time. If you need anything, if you need the help of the congregation, the prayers of the elders, if you need to become a Christian because you know what it means to become a Christian and you've studied it, this will be your time to respond right now as we stand and as we sing together.